Hello, everybody. We're going to talk about China's one child policy. The aim of this lesson is to be able to explain the benefits of this policy. So, let's start. Let us remember the timeline of the one child policy. In 1950, the Chinese had a large population growth. The government's idea was that the more people there are, the stronger they are. However, in 1962, there was a large famine that killed around 30 million people. By the 1970s, many countries started worrying about their population growth, including China. In 1979, they introduced the one child policy. The policy lasted for a number of years, but in 2007, they relaxed this policy, making it a two child policy and allowing parents to have two children. In 2016, this policy was abolished. So let's look at some of the benefits that this policy brought about. The one child policy was introduced in 1979 because there were fears of a repeating of the famine that occurred in the past. Since they introduced the one child policy, the famine which was previously forecast did not occur as there were less people and they were able to be fed. The population growth rate decreased by more than 10% since the policy was introduced. This is a graph showing the population in China. As you can see, since the 1960s, it has continued to increase. You can see the dip in the population in 1962. That was due to the famine that devastated the whole country, where 30 million people died. But after that, you can see the population continuing to increase. But let's look at the population a little bit more closely. Let's look at a number of years. Look at the difference of 20 years. We'll start with 1960, 1980, 2000, and 2020. Between each of these years, there's a 20-year gap. In the years between 1960 and 1980, population increased by 314 million. In the next 20 years, between 1980 and the year 200, population increased by 281 million. And in the latest 20 years, between the year 2000 and 2020, population increased by only 146 million people. So as you can see, the population is increasing, but it's increasing at a much smaller rate. You can see that in the 20 years before the one child policy, the population grew by around 300 million people. And as soon as the policy started taking effect, the amount of people being born decreased very rapidly. In fact, if you compare the amount of people born in the last 20 years with the amount of people born before the one child policy, it is almost half the amount of people that have been born in the same period of time. Because less children were being born, this helped with the demand for food and energy. This meant that less people were hungry and people had enough resources. The parents who abided by the one child policy and only had one child could get cheap loans and cash bonuses. This was called the one child certificate, sort of a passport that showed that you were only one child in the family. And having this one child certificate entitled the parents and the child to a number of benefits. These are some of the benefits that the parents and child got. If the parents only had one child, they received an extra month's salary every year until the child is 14. The parents also had higher wages, better housing. If they were farmers, they would have cheaper fertilizer and free water for their crops. They got priority services in school and at hospitals, better pensions, and some students were even given extra points on their tests just because their parents had only had one child. Because couples only had one child, they put all their effort and finances into this child. This meant that, unlike the past, they would encourage their daughters to continue studying and go to university. Because of all the pressure parents put on their children, the children that grew up as an only child during the one child policy had all the energy and finances of their parents. Since there was now only one child to continue the family legacy and to help the parents when they were older, they made sure that the children were well educated and could go to school and get a good job. All the pressure of the parents on the children and their education made them a very skilled workforce once they became adults. Final check. Match the statements about the one-child policy. Pause the video and allow yourself 2 minutes to work them out. When you're done, press play and check your answers. Okay, so the first statement, parents with one child get cheap loans and cash bonuses. There are more young educated women in China today. The pressure parents put on the children means they are well educated and make a skilled workforce. And less children born meant that more people could find jobs more easily. Okay, remember, geography is everywhere.